What is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome to the Week 17 Waiver Wire Show. It is Fantasy Championship Week for millions upon millions of fantasy players around the world. Now, if you've made it to the championship, chances are you're not winning, you're just surviving. I mean, you're probably holding on for dear life. You're setting your lineup like you're defusing a one wrong click and boom, season over, group chat silence, fantasy depression. I mean, you're not confident, you're not calm, you're stress eating snacks that you don't even like and refreshing your fantasy app every 12 seconds like please don't be ruled out during pregame warmups. Now, if you didn't fight to get here, put an asterisk next to this season and wait on the call from Netflix, because you better believe they'll be making a documentary on the downfall of professional sports and how rigged results killed the industry. I mean, come on. I can see it now. Untold, the season that nothing made sense. It'll be a hard-hitting documentary about how professional sports collapsed under the weight of injuries, random goose eggs, and studs who just happened to vanish. They'll interview former fantasy football champions who were taken down by a game that was supposed to be horrible weather, but somehow at kickoff, it was just fine. Or maybe one of those players that were a game-time decision, which was actually decided 3 days earlier. And don't even get me started on a backup tight end named Elijah who ruined everything. Experts will come out and say things like, "We've never seen anything like this," while you sit there nodding like, "Yeah, I lost by 1.6 points because my opponent's kicker outscored my starting quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end combined all by himself." So whether you're barely alive in the championship or emotionally checked out and just waiting for the expose, just know this wasn't a season. It was a crime scene. And somehow we all still love it and we'll be back once again next year to go through it once again. But okay, it's Monday morning and we're running out of weeks to get the juices flowing. So once again, we're going after another Monday night pick'em on Underdog, and this week, we ain't playing it safe. So in today's show, I'm going Jonathan Taylor over 19.5 receiving yards, George Kittle over 22.5 yards on a long reception, and Tyler Warren over 35.5 receiving yards. If this hits, it's a little bit more than 6 times your money. Now, maybe you do want to play it a little bit safer. That's okay. Just flex it. You'll still like quadruple your money. But the deal's even better in that it's not too late to get signed up on Underdog and come play along with us. Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app, create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Then just make your minimum $10 deposit, but I do have a little bit of a cheat code for you. When you put just $5 on the plays that we just talked about in this show, whether you win or lose, they're still gonna give you $75 in bonus funds that are automatically added to your account. So even if this ticket misses, you will end the week with more money in your account than what you started with. Plus, you'll have some money in there that you can play along with us throughout the next few weeks and through the NFL playoffs. But don't worry, any money you win is money directly into your pocket. It's an absolute no-brainer. There's links to everything down below in the description. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into Week 17 and try to find the best players available. Now, like I'm sure you're well aware of, there's a ton of injuries right now, and the waiver wire is about as thin as it gets. We'll start off at quarterback, but the barrel is almost dry, right? Even backups are getting hurt at this point, but we'll start off with Tyler Shuck. He's only 12% owned going up against Tennessee. Now, Shuck has scored at least 17 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 starts. Now he gets a matchup going up against Tennessee, and they allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. At only 12% owned, he should be out there for a lot of you, and if you need a quarterback and you're desperate, he may be one of the better options this week that's available. Then we get Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers, 18% owned going up against Seattle, and it is absolutely mind-blowing. This is 2025 in a nutshell. The Panthers are on the verge of making the playoffs. At the beginning of the season, I thought they were on the verge of being like a Division II college, but somehow they've played well down the stretch, and Bryce hasn't been great, but he has had at least 15 points in 3 straight games and in 4 of his last 5. Now he gets a matchup going up against Seattle, who is slightly easier to throw on than run on. How about Quinn Ewers of the Miami Dolphins? Only 1% owned. Don't nobody out there own Quinn Ewers. He's going up against Tampa Bay. Now, you're probably going to see what he did last week and be like, Jake, Quinn had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in his first ever start against Cincinnati. Yeah, I know. I told you the barrel was almost empty, but he did complete 20 out of his 30 passes for 260 yards passing. He's highly available, and now he faces a Bucs defense that has just fallen apart, and they allow the second most fantasy points to the quarterback position. And then how about Kirk Cousins going up against the Rams Monday Night Football, only 8% owned. Everyone is terrified of Kirk Cousins, especially primetime Cousins here this week, but I'm glad it's not on Christmas. It's a home game, Monday night against the Rams, and Cousins has scored at least 18 points now in back-to-back games. Going up against the Rams, they allow right around 18 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and I do love that Drake London is back. Now, after that, we go down to the running back section. We got Blake Corum still at the top of the list, 40% owned, going up against Atlanta, and we have been talking about Blake Corum on this show for well over a month at this point. He's scored over 12 fantasy points now in 4 straight games and continues to be in a near 50-50 split with Kyren Williams. Now he'll go up against an Atlanta defense that just allowed 5.7 yards per carry to the crappy Arizona Cardinals last week. Then we get Chris Rodriguez in Washington, 30% owned, going up against Dallas. And a healthy C-Rod once again took over the majority of the work in this backfield in Washington. He played against Philadelphia and he played pretty well. He racked up 63 yards and a touchdown, but now he faces Dallas and they allow over 23 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. He could be on your waiver wire. Then we get down to Michael Carter once again, 40% owned. A lot of people picked him up last week. He's going up against Cincinnati, and he should be in line for another start. He didn't play bad last week. He averaged 5.9 yards per carry, but Arizona fell behind, and they really couldn't run the football very much. Now he goes up against Cincinnati, who by far, and it's not even close, allows the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs at nearly 30.2 points per game to opposing teams' running backs. It's a great matchup for Michael Carter. How about Emmanuel Wilson in Green Bay, 38% owned, going up against Baltimore? The matchup against Baltimore isn't great, but right now, pretty much everyone in Green Bay is injured. Jordan Love, Malik Willis, Josh Jacobs, Romeo Doubs. This could be a third-string quarterback situation in Green Bay, and if Josh Jacobs were to sit, we could see a butt ton of Emmanuel Wilson in Week 17. Now, after him, we got Tajay Spears of the Tennessee Titans going up against New Orleans, and the Tennessee running game has really shown up over the last few weeks of the season. Last week alone, Tajay Spears had 18 touches for 105 total yards and a touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now he gets a much better matchup this week against the Saints. Neither team really has much to play for, and there's no reason for them not to give Tajay Spears volume once again. Which now brings us to the wide receiver position. Top of the list here is Parker Washington of the Jacksonville Jags. He's 23% owned, going up against Indianapolis. And sure, a lot of it had to do with poor tackling on Denver's behalf in Week 16. However, Parker Washington still racked up 145 yards and a touchdown. But honestly, to me, what I really wanted to focus on was the target share. He received 10 targets and led the team in targets last week. Now, this red-hot Jags offense goes to Indianapolis to face off against the Colts and their banged-up secondary. If Parker Washington is anywhere near 8+ targets, he's going to be start-worthy in Week 17. How about Adam Thielen of the Pittsburgh Steelers, 5% owned, going up against Cleveland? I know it's not 2017 anymore, but Pittsburgh has a game to clinch the division and the playoffs. Plus, there's a chance that DK Metcalf is suspended for punching a fan on the sidelines. Now, DK finished the game in Week 16 after that incident, but we did see Adam Thielen become the second leading receiver in this offense, and it would not surprise me if DK were to miss. Aaron Rodgers could rely on the wily veteran of Adam Thielen to help carry them to the promised land against a Cleveland defense that's struggling to say the least. Now, after Thielen, we got Mac Hollins of the New England Patriots. He's going up against the Jets. He's only 5% owned, and all eyes really gravitate towards Stephon Diggs. But Mac Hollins quietly had 9 targets, 7 catches, and 69 yards on Sunday Night Football. He continues to be one of the top targets in this passing offense for Drake May, who looks like an MVP candidate, and now he gets a matchup going up against the Jets, who allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Lastly, Jalen Coker of the Carolina Panthers, he's 14% owned going up against Seattle. And it's the week of Christmas, and the Carolina Panthers are fighting for the division. Now, Coker really hasn't done much majority of the season, but he is the next lowest owned option in this offense that actually has a weekly role. I would not be surprised if Carolina struggles to move the football against Seattle on the ground, which could lead to more targets going the way of Jalen Coker. Which means it's time to head to tight ends, the football kind, of course. It's been a long season, but we're still going to keep it classy around here. The first one, Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans, 12% owned going up against New Orleans, and Okonkwo is coming off his best game of the year. It was the first time he'd scored double-digit fantasy points all year long, but he's one of the most targeted options in the Titans passing game, and now they face off against an average Saints defense. How about A.J. Barner of the Seattle Seahawks next, 15% owned going up against Carolina? And at times, A.J. Barner is just an afterthought in this offense, and then it's like, all of a sudden, they remember he's out there on the field, and they start peppering him with balls. Week 16, though, was the first time he'd scored over 10 fantasy points in a game since Week 11. Now he gets a matchup going up against Carolina. Carolina is great against the pass. However, they do allow 11 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Next up, Mike Gesicki of the Cincinnati Bengals, 4% owned going up against Arizona. And Gesicki has now scored 11 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 in a matchup between 2 teams that really have nothing to play for. At least this is a great matchup for Gesicki because the Cardinals, they allow the 7th most points to opposing tight ends. And then lastly, don't tell Kyle, it's Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints, only 2% owned going up against Tennessee. And with the running game banged up in New Orleans, Alvin Kamara and Devin Neal, it was never going to be Audric Estime. No, Taysom Hill became the leading rusher in this backfield. He had 12 carries on the ground and 4 receptions in the passing game. If he can get anywhere near that kind of usage against Tennessee, I hate to say it, but he'll be a top 12 tight end in Week 17. But now that we know who to pick up, how do we rank these guys? Well, this is how I have them ranked as of right now. At the top of the list, it's still Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams, a great offense that provides scoring opportunities in a 50-50 split with a decent matchup. He's on the top of the list. Then, Emmanuel Wilson. As of right now, Josh Jacobs is questionable to play. Would I be surprised if he sat? No, not this week, so Emmanuel Wilson's near the top of this list. Then Michael Carter going up against Cincinnati in a great matchup. Then we go into Parker Washington against Indy. Then C-Rod Chris Rodriguez of the Washington Commandos going up against Dallas, followed by Adam Thielen, Tajay Spears, Mac Hollins, Jalen Coker. Now, we get down to the quarterbacks and tight ends. Just because they're at the bottom of the list, this does not mean I value them any less. Not everyone needs a quarterback or a tight end, so I rank them by position at the bottom of the list. So when you look at quarterbacks, we got Tyler Shuck, then Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins, and then the rookie, Quinn Ewers. If you're looking for a tight end, it's A.J. Barner, Mike Gesicki, Taysom Hill, and then Okonkwo. But it's Week 17. It doesn't matter if you're starting or stashing these guys. You may be picking them up just to block your opponent, and that is great. That's a perfect strategy. Fab budgets don't matter. It's the last week of the season for so many people. Go out there and spend whatever you got to spend to get the job done. Now, maybe you're out there looking for a Streamin D. There are not going to be many available with good matchups here this week. Maybe the Ravens are available. They may be on waivers due to their matchup against New England last week, but now they get a matchup going up against Green Bay in a game that they have to win to even have a chance at the playoffs. Plus, Green Bay may be without Jordan Love, Malik Willis, Josh Jacobs, and Romeo Doubs. How about the Steelers? Maybe they're available out there. They're going up against Cleveland. Now, they may have been dropped due to their matchup this past week against Detroit, but now they get a low-scoring Cleveland Cleveland offense who just lost Quinshon Judkins, and if the Steelers win this game, they can clinch the division. How about the Saints also going up against Tennessee? And this defense has had one of the best late season schedules. They've been playing pretty well, and now a low-powered Tennessee offense can really turn into a couple turnovers, or at least minimal damage to not ruin your fantasy week. But all right, there you have your waiver wire show for championship week, week 17. Now, if you do play in week 18, don't worry, we'll be here week 18 as well, even though a lot of people won't be. Now, this has been a tough season, no doubt, and if you've made it this far, thank you for the support through 17 weeks. Plus, we wish you nothing but the best. Go out there and bring the trophy home to Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.